Thanks. Mr. Secretary, can I ask you a question? I'm sorry to interrupt the meeting. I just wanted to know, are we going to be able to do the police contract still? Because I know we're moving to the budget, which is fine, but I just wanted to know because the chief and the deputy chief are here.
Well, that'll be the board's will.
Okay.
Let's get back into regular meeting here and we'll discuss that.
All right, thank you. Okay, I asked. Let's see.
I thought it was Christine's son. I thought it was Christine's son. That must have been different.
Oh my God. I knew this was going to be one. That's why there was no way we were getting out of it.
Yeah.
There was no way.
Yeah, I don't have to be on until 2:30, so I can grab a sandwich on my way in.
I did this morning, so that I had like at least some cheat sheet stuff. This is the right one. Like the 334. Now, what we were talking about, we're hoping that they do it, was, I think you're right, when Michael like segregating this money, because we throw in a budget, that turned into a horror show, when it kind of like fell
When it
off.
disappears.
Right, yeah. Can't, this way, if we can do that, I think that's a better way of tracking it, looking at it, segregating it, so that especially where we're gonna be paying it back. We need to have full, and the council does as well, of knowing, okay, this is exactly, so if it's not 3.9, it's 3, or it's 2.5.
Or Kim, can you see if we have a quorum of our membership back?
They're coming back.
I will check that right now for you.
Is Christine Shaw back on the...
Yeah, I didn't see her yet.
I didn't see her yet either.
Mr. Biller is here. Well, at least he's on the call. David, are you with us?
Oh, yeah, thank you.
John White.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you, Tom. Tom, I see that you're here. Just confirm that you're here. Let's see.
Mark.
Tom.
Might be out there.
Might be on, but away. Yeah, I don't see Christine.
It might on my screen, but not. Just went away. All right, well, it's 12:20. Yeah. Do we have a quorum on the board?
Yes, you're right.
Our colleagues from West Haven. Mayor, you got your contingent with you?
Yes, I have both Scott Jackson and Colleen O'Connor, Republican representative from the City Council. And also the chief and deputy chief are back, and our procurement director and our personnel director.
Very good.
Mr. White is just getting back in again, I think. And here's Christine. There you go.
All right, well, I'll rejoin
If we get to that.
our regular meeting of the municipal council for May 17, 2022. We're coming back from executive session where we discussed the Tier 4 designation of the city of West Haven and a variety of draft documents that the board will need to complete prior to commencing its oversight activities. I'll report on that, but first I wanted to give the board a chance to reflect on the Tier 4 designation. We did have a 30-day public comment period. As everyone saw, the governor has approved the designation. Or if board members have any comments they want to make about where we are today. Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Secretary Bentham. I want to acknowledge the number of comments that came in from members of the public, from residents of the city of West Haven. And I also want to thank Mayor Rossi for her pledge of support and cooperation with the work that we're about to undertake. The decision to recommend Tier 4 designation it was a process that led us to this point, and we do believe that there's a path forward, and collaboration is going to be key to a swift resolution of the issues that are before us. So I'm grateful for the collaboration. We are on the same side. That was one kind of refrain that was of some concern when we first discussed Tier 4, that as if MARB was interests adverse to that of the city and the city officials. We're not. We are very mindful of the impact on the residents of the city, and we will do whatever we can to ensure that the public's confidence and faith in its municipality is restored.
Very good. Other comments? Yes, I'll just say for myself, we are at the beginning of what I expect will be a lengthy process with the city to get it back to where it needs to be, where I know the mayor and her staff want to get it. And we'll do our best to do so in a way that's efficient and productive at all times. So with that, we discussed in executive session an agreement, a draft agreement that between the MARB, the Municipal Accountability Review Board, and the city of West Haven, under which we will transfer a balance of funds from the restructuring, municipal restructuring funds account that has been made available by the General Assembly to towns under the MARB supervision. Under the agreement, as we discussed, the city will return those funds to the Office of Policy and Management, which we will use at the direction of the board to engage resources to do this period of enhanced oversight of the city, hopefully in collaboration and cooperation with the city. This agreement will, as I understand it, as we intend, will need the approval of the city, the mayor and its council. And I would propose to sign on behalf of the MARB and direct staff to negotiate and conclude this agreement before our next meeting. And we will execute this agreement before our next meeting. At our next meeting, we will discuss in some detail the use of those funds, the draft statement of work for the initial engagement of resources, as well as other policies and procedures that we may have to conclude and agree to as a board before we get going in earnest. If that is agreeable to the board, is there any discussion, by the way, on the record of any of that? Seeing no discussion, can I have a motion to direct Office of Policy and Management, myself as chair of the board, to direct staff at OPM to conclude this agreement and execute it in advance of our next regular meeting? Go moved. By, I didn't see who that was.
Egan.
Mr. Egan, and seconded by Mr. Biller. Mr. Brockman's waving at me. Yes. Good. All right. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. We will carry out that work in advance of our next meeting. I would like then to, again, begging the board's indulgence here. I think if we can move it expeditiously, we've got maybe a half hour or so left, or actually I have less. There's one important item left, I think, on our agenda that we should move to expeditiously. If the board could give me a motion, someone to move to a review, discussion, and action of the FY23 budget for the city of West Haven. So moved by Mr. Egan, seconded by
David Biller, second.
Mr. Biller. All those in favor, please say by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. No. Any abstentions? The ayes have it. We'll move to item 6, C, review, discussion, action of the FY23 budget. The mayor's recommended FY23 budget was reviewed by the subcommittee at the March and April meetings. A revised budget reflecting adjustments made by the city council was distributed by the board. OPM staff has also provided an overview of changes made to the budget and the impact of those changes. City council was expected to meet again last night. I'm not sure if additional changes have been made to the budget. The mayor is nodding.
Yes, there were some additional changes. We had some challenges with this budget, not quite balancing and mill rates, but
Okay.
last night there was a total of 3 changes, and they did adopt the budget with a mill rate of 34 mills.
Could you let us know, for the record, the changes as you understand them?
Absolutely. There were 3 changes. I haven't written down earlier, but I will remember them. We decreased $50,000 from one department. The city council was holding that for the health department. We decreased from public works $37,000, and then also additional $5,000. And that brought the mill rate to the 34 mills, which is what the council was looking to achieve.
Or Kim, are there any framing comments you want to make, or summary comments you want to make, or recommendations, or should we get right to questions?
Well, first, when you talk about questions, there's some things as far as housekeeping that hasn't been completed as far as this budget is concerned. So all of the questions that were posed at the subcommittee level, those questions have not been answered from the members here, and we did provide everybody the questions that had, but many of them are still incomplete. Julian?
Yes,
Anything else that we're missing?
just in terms of framing, and this is all included in the brief memo that went out yesterday, and this is sort of outside of the small changes that were made last night. I included an itemization of the changes that occurred between the recommended budget that was submitted by the mayor on March 18th and the budget that was reviewed last night. And you'll see that itemization is an attachment to the memo that was sent out yesterday. The net impact of those changes is relatively modest, $68,000 increase. So we're still working with a budget that increases by about 1.7% prior to last night's changes. Within the individual accounts, though, there are some pretty significant shifts. So I just want to hit those so that everybody is aware of where those more significant shifts occurred. So there was an adjustment. It's kind of a neutral adjustment to address the change in the motor vehicle mill rate cap in the final adopted state budget. So you'll see a shift that results in an increase in the motor vehicle levy and a decrease in what was anticipated as the state reimbursement. On the expenditure side, the larger shifts occurred. Some of the larger shifts occurred in what are the back sections of the budget. So medical benefits for employees and retirees. There were significant corrections and updates made to those accounts that resulted in a considerable decrease in the amount that's budgeted for those items. I believe it was primarily employee cost shares that were not factored into the original proposal. So that brought expenditures down by about $570,000. There was an elimination of $250,000 in the contingency area for an account referred to in the document as an uncashed check reserve. I'm still not really clear on what exactly that was, but it is no longer in the budget. And the city council also then increased the amount that would be set aside for fund balance from the $150,000 that was in the mayor's recommended to $790,000 in the budget. And I guess that was not changed last night, so that still stands at just shy of $800,000. earmarked to pay for some piece of the proposed police contract, and I'm guessing it's the general wage increase piece. And so that would leave $640,000, if my assumptions are correct, about $640,000 would be intended to increase fund balance. And you'll see from the memo that that is still a significant deviation from the most recent 5-year plan, which had close to $4 million in FY23 going to fund balance. And then another, you can see some of the ups and downs in the departmental budgets. If there are questions on those, they will have to be addressed by the city. The other important note is that in addition to some of the unanswered questions from the list that was previously provided, we do have the impact on the state's pension liability that would result from the police contract. The actuarial firm estimated that in the FY23 impact to be in the neighborhood of $2.2 or $2.3 million. That has not been, best I can tell, has not been incorporated into the recommended budget, and it does not sound as though the city council made any changes to address that either.
Just something you misspoke there. It's not the state pension. It's the city's pension.
Did I say state pension liability?
Oh. State's.
Yeah, I meant the, police pension.
Yeah, or problems there.
That's it.
I can't believe it.
In your memo to us, you've got the city's adopted budget section of your memo to the board. And on the second page, you've got operating budget increase is 10.1%. Then your next sentence is adjustments resulted in an overall increase of 1.7 over 22. Help me understand what are you talking about? You've got a 10% increase, but then you say it's 1.7 over 22.
So if you zero in on just the aggregate of departmental expenses, it increases by 10%, which is much of it offset by a reduction in debt service and contingency. So the overall increase is 1%. Oh, and the fact that the Board of Ed is held flat. But if you just take the operating department and roll those together, that's where the 10% comes from.
Okay. I'm gonna let the city, I don't know, that's a pretty good overview. Why don't we let the city address what you just said? If the mayor or staff want to jump in here.
Well, I'll jump in on one that's easy and clear, but the mayor is gonna take the lead on this. That $250,000 unchecked cash reserve was for a retired teacher who went years without cashing her checks. So we had that liability, but we were able to clear the books on that, so that line, after many years in the budget, is no longer required.
There's a story there.
Right, that was it.
Maybe sometime.
That was, yeah, no, she had a lot of checks, and that unfortunately was put in there, and we no longer needed it because it was completely paid back. And so, I know one had to do with the police pension, correct? The liability, because
Yes.
we did raise it for the actuarial study that was sent to us, and it went from 2.4 to 3.6 in FY23. The original actuarial study, but I know that staff worked on this, I believe also Michael Mylone, and that originally it was over 4 million, but Jen Castellano, and she was supposed to be on the call, I don't know if she still is, because she was on the call earlier, to address the situation and why fluctuations happen, because originally we got one number of 4-point-something million, but then she restructured or whatever happened and it went down to 3.6 million, and that's what we had from them, the actuarial study for FY23.
But Mayor, that did not include the police, correct?
It's the police pension, so yes, it is a police pension.
Well, the question is whether or not the valuation as of, it was July 1, 2020, would have contemplated a contractual change that had not yet been in effect.
Well, again, without having Jen on here, I don't know, I don't think she's...
I'm here.
Oh, you are here, so can you address that? And then I know, as we had talked over the phone, that it was originally well over $4 million, but then it got backed into the 3.6 million.
Okay, I'm just trying to find that, the 3.6 million figure. There it is.
I can simplify the question as follows. You're proposing an increase, you're proposing a new contract for the police that provides for substantial increases. Have we accounted in your budget, FY23, the increase in what you will have to make as a contribution for the pensions that's attributable to this increased salary?
Jen, did we take any of that into consideration when the actuarial study was done?
Okay, so the original July 2020 valuation projected, projected fiscal year 23 a contribution of about 4.3 million. That did not take into account the investment performance in the fund in fiscal year 21. So we updated our estimate to reflect the strong investment performance in fiscal year 21 and came up with a new estimate for fiscal year 23 of 3.6 million. But that does not contemplate any contractual changes to the police contract.
Lee said yes.
For the pension.
For the pension.
Mr. Hamilton?
Yes, thank you. So, just to follow up, a final point on this, based on the cost analysis that it appears that you prepared, Melvin prepared, the actuarially determined contribution, in fact, as Julian indicated, would need to go up by almost $2.3 million to account for the COLA increase of on retirees. Is that correct?
That is correct. It is a function of both the COLA increase and the increase in salaries for the active employees.
And the COLA increase, is that, and this is really, I guess, more of a legal question than an actuarial question, but perhaps you or the city is able to answer it. Is that COLA mechanism spelled out in the collective bargaining agreement? I don't recall this discussion last month about this impact on the pension, and it really threw me for a loop, to be honest. I'm wondering where is that COLA provision, and given the fact that this wage adjustment for police is intended really to attract and retain staff, the fact that it's having such a major impact on the city's ARP, or ADAC, for the police pension, really is, to me, a huge problem.
Mr. Hamilton, if I may, I'm Chris Hodgson from Bertram Moses, legal attorney for the city. The police defined benefit plan provides for a COLA for retirees based on wage increases, so that does account for part of the increase in EDC. The other part, as Jen explained, is there's an increase in salaries which will reflect on pensions for the remaining active employees in the DE plan. So that also is reflected in the 2.3 million.
So is there a breakdown between
understand for the active employees, there's really nothing you can do about that. It's 50/50 here. What is the breakdown of that 23 million additional cost in rough?
A majority of it is due to the retiree COLA adjustments. A liability on the active side is the contribution cost is about a 16% increase over the original amount. For the rest is primarily due to retirees and a COLA.
Okay, so I guess my question is that COLA language modified to exclude this $10,000. I don't mean to go down a huge rabbit hole here, but this is a massive uncovered liability in the operating budget, and there's no way I could personally vote for an operating budget that's got a $2.3 million hole built into it.
If it's a question or contract, then we do have clear language in the pension contract, which would expose the city to some liability if they do not provide the COLA as agreed.
Yeah, I was wondering, can that contract language be modified through collective bargaining with the bargaining group?
Well, the union doesn't represent the retirees. They'd be their own group. It'd be a question of meeting with the retirees, potentially.
Okay, so that makes it rather complicated. I don't know, I'll let other people ask questions. To me, this is a huge issue. I don't see how I get to a point where I can support a budget that has a $2.3 million hole in it. The other point I do want to make, I don't know if Mr. White is on the line, but I'm sure he will make this point about the fact that we don't have an updated 5-year plan from the city, and that also is a major impediment for my support is to understand over the next 5 years how this budget kind of fits into the larger picture. That is one of the things that the board has required of other municipalities that are MARB oversight, and so that is also the major issue is we don't have an updated 5-year plan.
Mr. White, I believe you were next. Mr. White, are you there? Mr. White, while Mr. White is getting connected, Mr. Waxenberg, you're next. I'll come back to Mr. White.
Yeah, the issues that Tom raised regarding police contract, I think we need to hold in abeyance because there are several issues that are troublesome about what's before us in that contract that impact budgetarily, as Tom has expressed, which is the $2.3 million hole. It also, regarding the COLA, we can discuss that later, but realization based on the Goldman letter is anybody that retires prior to 93 gets a $6,000 increase in their COLA, and everybody else after retiring in 1992 gets 1.5%. And legally, I believe council is correct. You can't impact a retiree. They're not part of the bargaining group. So it would be tenuous at best, if not illegal, to unilaterally have the active police union modify a benefit that a retiree is to enjoy or is enjoying. So, but getting back to the budget, which is the topic, I have serious concerns about this budget only because obviously the police contract we'll be discussing, but the questions that are yet to be answered by them regarding what came out of the subcommittee that are left unanswered And also, like Tom said, the 5-year plan is not before us. So, approving a budget, it's very difficult to approve a budget that, until we have a full explanation of some of the outstanding questions that exist.
I'm going to go ahead, thank you, Mr. Waxenberg. I'm going to go ahead and ask one more question, Matt, before I recognize you. I want Julian to elaborate on this. I don't know if you covered this, Julian, but I had a question about use of federal funds to cover some of this budget, including but not limited to the increases attributable to the new labor contract. We don't see, obviously we don't have a 5-year plan to know how we will pick that up in the out years if you're going to use one-time revenue to cover part of this budget. So that would be a question I have as well, use of one-time revenue without knowing how we deal with that down the road, which is something that obviously we grappled with at the state level this year, but we have answers. I just want to know what yours are. So, Mr. Brockman.
To share that question. I have my procedural questions. This is our first budget and I think also our first labor contract while we've had a town in Tier 4. And so my question, I guess for Tim and Julian is if we postpone action on, I guess we have a concern about the police contract, now it leads to the budget. I know that the police contract is also on our agenda. Are we able to, or what's the repercussions of not taking action on those items today? I presume the police contract has a different timeline, my recollection, than the budget, but.
I'm going to take a stab at that, and I have counsel on the line. Julian and I talked about this before the meeting. I think if you consult the statute with regard to Tier 4, you'll see that we do have the ability to approve or reject collective bargaining agreements before they take effect, before their new term starts. So we don't have to take action today. I believe this takes effect July 1st. So we will have an opportunity to continue to take a look at that. It being my own thought, and I just commend this to the board, that we hold off on talking about the contract until we get some understanding of how this budget is going to cope with it. If the city can cope with the contract in its budget and show us how it's going to do that in its 5-year plan, happy to take a look at it. But the city has within its toolbox any number of things that it can do to bring that budget into balance, not only this year, but in the out years, including but not limited to taking a hard look at that contract. So I don't know that we need to look at the contract today. I think we still have some time on that. That'd be my thought about that, Mr. Brown. Mr. White, has you joined us?
I hope so. Can you use the damn Russian hacker? Yes, I will keep your money somewhere, just, everything I, anyway, Secretary, you said what essentially I was going to, which was, I don't think we can do the contract now, and quite frankly, we can't do the budget until there is a 5-year plan, the police being a major thing. I am assuming that despite the Tier 4 designation, that it is up to the council and the mayor to balance the budget. I am really hoping that after decades of not balancing budgets, we're not back there and somebody is saying, let the MARB raise the mill rate. Not going to play that game. I really hope it, I have no idea why there is no 5-year plan. I looked at my notes, the reason given was, we don't have the ADAC in. Well, if that was a month ago, then you put in a plug and you show it like a neighbor. There seems to be a deliberate kind of hiding of the ball, not showing how we pay for police contracts. And I really hope that the MARB sends a very strong message to the city that it's up to them to balance the budget. When we get to how we use Tier 4 funds, and that's for another day, a lot of it is to put procedures in place. well, that's great. But if we don't have the mindset to fix the problem long-term, then you can draft all the policies you want, and that's a waste of money. So I would like to hear the mayor's response to why there's no 5-year plan and why there has not been an explanation as of the middle of May for how to pay for the police contract along with the across-the-board raises and not putting aside a whole bunch of money for the general fund. I do notice that the mill rate was decreased by 3.5% in accordance with last year, in accordance with the plan, the last plan. But I am very upset that there is no 5-year plan, and with only 6 weeks left to get the tax bills out, we're no closer to being able to approve this budget.
Mr. Egan is next, I believe.
Just 2 points. I concur with all the concerns regarding the budget. This is maybe more of a procedural point for Garrett, is that I believe under the statute, we would have until May 21st to actually send it back to the legislative body. The legislative body would have until June 15th to revise it and send it back to us. If they don't take action by June 15th, this board could implement a modified budget, set the taxes, mill rate, and whatnot. So I think we can, one way or another, I don't know if there has to be no action, sending it back, or there has to be a rejection in today's meeting to formally reject it and send it back to the legislative body. The other thing I kind of have an overall concern about is with the police contract, this may be also a question, is that at the time of the time period that's basically held by the SBLR, that was within the Tier 3 designation of 44 days. And looking at the memo that we received from, as far as any type of agreement, kind of hold in abeyance the timeline, it didn't seem the memo that we received from Attorney Walsh really kind of solidified that idea. It was more of, you guys can take a look, but we retain our rights under 4-474. So I think that's something that we should be prepared for, because I think the city, at the end of the day, is going to end up having to find a way to certainly properly fund this.
Mr. Waxenberg.
Seeing as how they're intertwined, and Commissioner mentioned that the police contract not taking action. Let me give you some, if you don't mind, my own personal research and observations. Being a union advocate, as I am for years in negotiating contracts, etc., I can't support this contract, period, for a variety of reasons. But that said, we have this contract coming up next year. They're already getting a 2.5% increase this year for next year. We are in negotiations next year. We will be in negotiations as a Tier 4 municipality next year. They're using ADEC money, ARPA money, to come up with what I consider to be a hastily drafted document of 10,000 plus 2.5. At the last meeting, I said it's basically more than 2.5% general wage increase, because they increased the base by 10,000 to begin with. She said no, that's not true. Well, the labor attorney says it is true. Point one for confusion. The second issue is some of the data that was supplied to us by the town is, you know, so you can advocate, you put your stuff before a body for acceptance, is that done in arbitrations? It cuts both ways. The example is, Hartford has 72 vacancies out of over a 400-person manpower budget, and they're at their percentage is considerable. New Haven, 400-person police force. The police chief just said she has 100 vacancies. Norwich, on the TV last night, said they are struggling with vacancies. West Haven, with no question, is struggling with vacancies. It's having an impact on its contract and on its service, as all municipalities are. There is no doubt that they're one of the lowest paid, if not the lowest paid in their area. But that's by their own doing. This started back when they went into a $9 million deficit in 2007 and decided to change the pension system, which was, in my mind, totally ridiculous. New Haven has a higher salary and a higher pension system. They have 100 vacancies. Personally, there should be no change in this contract until it's negotiated next year, when you can do a split salary schedule that will attract and retain members. You mentioned you got 50 people leaving, you got hired back to 46. That's over 90% hire back rate. Of the 50, how many were retirees? I don't know. It makes it sound as if everybody's leaving for greener pastures. Of those 50, some of them have to be retirees. So, to me, personally, if they want to use ARPA funds to create a bonus, a recruitment and retain bonus off of the budget, and they negotiate that with the union or wherever legally they can do that, and bring it to MARB, I'd be more receptive to that concept. Where you're splitting, let's say, the $10,000, for those that are on staff as of December 30th, they get $5 grand, and July 31st, you get $5 grand as a recruitment and retention bonus. That's up to them. But when you get into a hastily crafted, let's just give everybody $10,000 increase. Why am I giving 70 people that are in this, out of the 120, who are in the pension system, a $10,000 bump in their pension? The second issue is you're giving a retiree retired 1993 a $6,000 increase in their retirement. I'm not against it, you just can't pay for it. So why are we going down another hole without looking at the totality of the issues? You're sacrificing, according to the police, you're sacrificing recruitment and retention because of salaries and pensions. $10,000 bonus plus 2.5% is not going to solve that problem. It's not going to do it. It's going to create a problem budgetarily for you, but it's not going to solve the police problem. It hasn't solved it in the other districts. So I guess my own personal opinion as a MARB member is I find it difficult to renegotiate a contract that was negotiated with expires and during negotiations next year. We can look at legacy costs, we can look at split schedules, we can look at the whole issue of recruitment and retention when you've got the time. And you may be able to solve a recruitment and retention issue this year if you choose to with some of your ARPA funds for a recruitment and retention bonus that's well thought out to try to keep existing staff or however you choose to do it. But those are my thoughts on the police contract. I do not want to be forced to vote no on a union contract. And unfortunately, I would be forced to vote no on this if it's before me in this fashion.
Thank you, Mr. Waxenberg. I'm just going to note for the board's information, if we choose to disapprove the budget under the Tier 4 structure, the city has until May 21st. I'm sorry, the board has until May 21st to provide the city with its reasons for disapproval. I think we've outlined several of those, and I'm happy to have the staff reduce that to a memo or a letter that I can send to the city. But if we disapprove the budget, the city would have until June 15th to resubmit the budget to the MARB for approval. If the city fails to submit the budget, resubmit the budget, or if we don't approve their resubmitted budget, the MARB could then adopt the budget for the city. I don't know if that's helpful to the members, but Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Secretary Beck, on that. It gets at a number of my questions regarding procedure and process. In my mind, this has less to do with the substance or wisdom of the police contract and more to do with the points made by several of the board members, and they are the necessity of a balanced budget and addressing the pension costs or the contract costs, and squaring it with a 5-year plan. So I don't even believe that the contract is properly before us, given those weaknesses in the presentation. So so my question to you, Secretary Beckham, or anyone who can answer it is it a disapproval of the budget, or is it a request for, revision and resubmittal, or is there no functional distinction between the two?
I believe it is the former, is disapproval, and then the effect is they then give us a new version that we can take a look at on June 15th.
Correct. So I would just make clear that to the extent I vote to disapprove, it is because of the incomplete package that's been submitted and less to do with the contract itself.
Yes, I think we've established the absence of the 5-year plan is of concern. I think we've established that if the police contract were to be approved in its current form, we don't know about its sustainability in the out years, including but not limited to the ADEC contribution that would be required. I think the fund balance contribution was noted as being lower than we would like, lower than has been established in previous plans. I think just the general operating expenditures increasing by the level that they are increasing was of some concern. I'm happy to reduce all that to writing in a letter subsequent to the board's disapproval today, so that the city would have notice thereof. Mr. Maxson.
Is it proper, without a formal vote, and this is just a suggestion, that it be, if the municipality and the union wish to continue to do whatever and resubmit a contract for our acceptance or rejection, that's up to them. My suggestion, though, is that they revisit this issue with the possible use of ARPA funds for the purpose of, again, I'm using recruitment and retention bonus concept ideas and not look to amend an existing contract. That's my own personal opinion. They can do whatever they want to do. I agree with Christine. My rejection is for the incompleteness of the budget as it stands. But I have a lot, as I stated, I don't want to have to vote no on a labor contract.
We are voting on the budget, not on the contract.
I understand.
That's the item in front of us, is the budget, and we've given the city lots of advice in the last half hour. Let me see who was next. I think Mr. White again.
Get rid of the Russians. I think we ought to think about the timing here. That there is a rejection, and I'm rejecting on the merits. The budget is unbalanced. And that means they have until the 15th to come back.
Yes.
If we don't like what they have, we have 15 days to come up with a budget if they're going to get those tax notices out.
We may have something prepared for you in advance.
Okay. Because one of the cities, and the other thing we need is from the city, that I think the argument that, well, we're not putting in, what was it, $4 million into the general fund is because we hit a home run, in 22 or 21 or sometime. And I'd like to see whether that's true, because I've not seen anything that says they've got to pay back, CARE Act funds, or that they have to pay back, what was in the budget, not in the budget, is the Massa, dividend, is an unbudgeted item. And, you know, we don't know where it is. We better get that stuff, because it's going to be on up. I mean, I think we ought to put every pressure on the city to do it themselves. That's what we're trying to do. If we bail them out, and I will be, and this is for later, I will be for, you know, watching the mill rate and cutting the dickens out of stuff. But anyway, that's for another time. But as you say, we really need to get our ducks in a row, especially if you're going to be relying on MARB members to, you know, to fill in. So, so I think that's means a rejection to certainly trigger the time period.
I think those are excellent points, Mr. White, particularly the issue of will the city have to make good on the federal funds at some point, and who will actually have to do that? Mr. Egan, I think. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Hamilton. Excuse me, Mr. Hamilton was next.
Sure, I'm just looking for a little clarification. I understand, you know, we're going to be voting most likely here. It looks like to reject the budget, the motion put on the table to that effect. Are we in a position where we can do nothing on the labor contract, or because of the statute, are we required to take some action on that, or which case we don't, in which case it would go into effect automatically?
It's my reading of the statute. I'm happy to have entertaining discussion on this, but it's my reading of the statute is that when they were under Tier 3, there was a time frame that we had to act within. But as I read the Tier 4 language, we can approve or reject any collective bargaining agreement prior to this term. Mr. White, who may have a thought here.
They come by occasionally. I think we may need legal help, because this contract was negotiated when they were in Tier 3.
But they're not now.
This goes
to the power of the board.
We've taken up. Okay. I don't know, and
I can see that it's a question that they are under Tier 4 now.
I mean,
the power of the board.
the same thing is to reject.
Mr. Egan.
Yeah, I was just gonna bring that point back up, is that I think, there should be a thought of that, because if the union's position is they didn't waive the timelines, then those timelines expired while we were within a Tier 3 designation, or the city was in a Tier 3 designation. Understanding your point that they're in Tier 4 now, I think the argument would be is that it was, the contract was implemented by default of no action prior to Tier 4. And I think that could be certainly could be, you know, an ongoing issue, but I think it's probably irrelevant as far as the contract goes right now, and the focus would be on, you know, a rejection of the budget as before us to go back to the legislative body. Is Mr. Hodgson still on the line, Mr. Secretary?
I don't know.
Yes.
Chris, I had a question, if you know this or the actuary doesn't. What exactly is the impact of the wage increases, specifically as far as the 2.75, and then separately the $10,000 wage increases? What is the impact on the retirees? Are they getting a piece of both of that? How is the COLA adjustment language written?
Yeah, it was $10,000 plus 2.5 was was, I believe it was 50% of that would go to retirees prior to 1993. And then the retirees since 1993 was raised as they get half of the general wage increase, was half of the 2.5 to 2.5%. I believe that's like Jen figured out.
And so it's basically the 50% of that, and there's no cap on those at all?
No, just at 50% of the PB plan. 50% of any wage increase.
So the current bargaining unit members are ultimately locked into. Okay, I guess I'll ask this question. Is that they're locked into bargaining or prior bargaining unit members who are no longer members of the bargaining? Right? And I understand you said that after I think Mr. Waxman's question, that the city could run afoul of prior provisions if for some reason those weren't taken into account for a COLA, but does it really, is there any leeway there that in theory the current bargaining unit representatives are bargaining for that by virtue of bargaining the wage agreement?
I don't believe the union has the power to negotiate for the retirees. The specific language for 1993 retirees is were hired for the 1993 was 50% of the actual dollar amount of the increase. So that's why they intend to cap the $10,000.
Okay, and that's specifically for a wage increase? That doesn't include if there was a, let's call it an increase in, say, a longevity pay.
That's right. I agree with that.
And at least at certain thresholds with other forms of payments under FLSA, those things are taken into account for time and a half provisions as far as what, like basically what full remuneration is.
Sure.
Okay. So if that money was structured in a different way than just a wage increase, call it what you will, it could possibly be a way to maybe avoid the impact of having retirees getting $6,000-7,000 raises.
Correct, as Mr. Waxenberg said, perhaps it was a bonus, but it doesn't address the underlying wage disparity with all our comparable towns.
Sure, I got it.
And it certainly would avoid the retiree issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Waxenberg.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the union and management has signed a waiver of the timelines. In accordance with statute, they retain the rights, but they signed a waiver up to this point.
It was not as formal as that, Mr. Waxenberg. It said the city in error failing to submit TA on a timely basis to MARB. We asked the union to waive the timelines. They said we certainly agree, MARB should look at this, but we retain all of our rights under the statute. I just made a point to the subcommittee that MARB here in 3 policies and procedures does provide to modify specific timelines for actions in the event of an unanticipated emergency or fiscal exigency. My position was the city's error did not deprive the MARB the opportunity to accept or reject it according to the procedures, as well as the Secretary's point that we're now in Tier 4, and we could all be moved.
My only concern is by rejecting a contract, now into a ballgame where you have 10 days according to the statute for them to renegotiate, etc. My preference is to, based on what everybody in West End who's on the line understands along with the chief, it's our intention for them to go back to the drawing board and come up with something that we believe will not have a budgetary impact that this contract would have, yet addresses some of the issues of recruitment and retention using some of the ARPA funds that the mayor had initially chose to use as one-time expenditures. So, my guess is it possible Personally, I don't think we have to act as much as give some suggestive direction to both parties for the future. But if the timelines legally require us to act, so be it. I just don't see that requirement there.
Mr. White.
Two suggestions to bring this to a close. I think, I'm not gonna make a motion unless I get a sense that this is the way people want to go, is number one, to reject the budget, and number two, to take Attorney Hudson up on his reading, which sounds right, which is on the contract, we should set a date for us to say yay or nay. And with the instruction, as Marcus said, why don't you kind of renegotiate? But it sounds like we should do something on the contract, and moving the date might eliminate some uncertainty. Yeah, just a thought.
Is that something that the parties who made those earlier representations with regard to the approval period for the MARB be amenable to? We could make it June 15, whenever the next regular meeting of the MARB is, when we will get either a resubmitted budget, well, we will get a resubmitted budget, we assume.
June 9th.
June 9th. We give ourselves till the 15th, just in case.
Sure.
So by mid-June, I don't know if we can agree to this, live and in person like this, but if I'm happy to commit as a board that we will take some action on that by June 15th. What do other board members think? Mr. Waxenberg, your hands up.
I agree with that. I think that the budget is the ultimate driver of cost. I think that both parties, contract is separate, have to come up, they choose profit, and then they're craft the budget with contract language in it. If they choose to do a bonus type concept using ARPA funds, that won't have a budget impact, to the best of my knowledge. If they choose to do something else, it would have budgetary impact, and hopefully that budget on the 15th would have it incorporated in there. I don't know what the parties will do, but I'm willing to set a firm deadline for the 15th to include any budget and/or contract negotiations to be included in the budget, however you want to phrase it.
But on or before that date, the board could act to approve or reject either the contract or the budget or both.
Correct.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Secretary Bynum. I defer to those who are at the negotiating table, and I'm fairly agnostic as to the terms of the budget, the elements of it, with the caveat that there has to be some solution to the retention issues that's before the city and other neighboring towns. With that said, I'm just keenly focused on whether the budget can accommodate that contract. And so I'm less inclined to take a position that is against the substance of the agreement that, again, I defer to those who are at the negotiating table, and more in the way of, does it fit? And what cuts does the city have to make in order to make sure it fits? So whatever the motion is that may or may not be advanced, I think that the focus has to be, even with Tier 4 designation, on the broader objective to ensure a balanced budget. However, the contract is accommodated, the budget has to be.
Okay, thank you.
I would echo those comments, and I would indicate that the other side of balancing a budget is raising revenue. Ms. Kiss?
I don't want to lose sight, it's not just this fiscal year, because it's the out years that are really concerned, and so we need the 5-year.
Yep, I think we've established that.
Yep.
Mr. Egan?
So, Mark, I'm sorry, I got confused with something that you said. we're gonna be taking an action on the budget, correct?
Correct. I believe so. That'd be my preference. And the city's gotten plenty of indication from us as to where we are on this, so I hope and believe they'll give us something on or before the 15th of June. I think our next meeting is scheduled for the 9th, actually, so we may want to reschedule that to give them the full period that they may need to do that. But, yes. So, let's see, Mr. Waxenberg, your hand's up?
Down now.
All right, Sean, your hands up. Okay. All right, I think we've thoroughly discussed this matter. Do any further comments about the question of approving the budget? I will entertain a motion to, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say to disapprove the budget.
We'll move.
Mr. Watkins. Is that second?
Patty.
Second. Mr. White, Mr. Egan, seconds. Motion to approve the budget. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, signify by saying no. Any abstentions? You guys have it. This is the budget. The city does have until 15th of June to resubmit a budget for approval. Towards that, all the work that would go into that, as we have discussed here. I think that pretty much disposes of our work today with regard to the city of West Haven, unless someone has a different view. I think we could probably conclude our business unless there's something else that the board would like to take up. Mr. White.
Were we going to set a date for the contract? In other words, that to take, to avoid any issue about free, whatever, can we just say, we extend the time for us to
Scott,
consider...
the Bailey School cafeteria project, the non-labor, it's under like a massive time crunch. If it's not commented on and approved to move forward today, we're not gonna make that time crunch.
The statute as Tier 4 powers of the MARB, that we have the ability to disapprove any and all collective bargaining agreements prior to their term.
Mountford, SW Mountford.
July 1st, I believe. But if anyone wants to enter into that agreement, extend that timeframe, that's fine with me, through June 15th. I expect we're going to take some action.
That's what was sent to
For
them.
June 15 as a board with regard to the budget. We may have to take action with regard to the contract, but perhaps not.
I'll be guided by council.
Referring to me, Mr. White, I think it would be belt and suspenders to also say that you modify the specific timelines under section I, B3 of your policies and procedures.
Julie or Garrett on the line? Care to comment?
But is that ID3 under tier 3 or tier 4?
Tier 3.
We are in tier 3 anymore.
So Jeff, I'm doing 4 things, that was we ran over in time, so I didn't hear Mr. White's comment.
There was a prior extension of the time frame, I guess, by agreement with the parties, the city, and the board, to extend the time frame for the board to make a decision about the contract.
They said they
When
need
we were in our prior
at least
posture,
10 weeks to
tier 3,
do.
there's a
He
suggestion
said
that
if it's not
we
started by next week,
adopt
it won't be
a
done.
belt and suspenders approach, and while also relying on our powers under Tier 4,
This is the
simply
one that they started,
continue
and
to
I made them
extend
stop.
the timeframe within which the board can make a decision, will make a decision with regard to the contract.
I emailed Julie
I'm sorry,
at
the
the
second
meeting,
was
but
Roman,
he hasn't answered.
section Roman numeral 1. I couldn't read my own writing.
All I can comment right now is where we are right now, is tier 4, so
Yeah.
the history that has gone by, I guess everybody, including the city, the union, and MARB, always There was always a distinct possibility that if time went on, they would be moved into a tier 4, and that's where we find ourselves today. That's the powers we have. The contract's before us now from the standpoint of a decision process, and I think more is in play.
Okay. Mr. White, I'm not sure what you were asking for us to do. You're asking for us to receive the assurances of those parties that they will agree to await the board's action until June 15th?
No, short and simple. I think that one would be to say that the MARB thinks that because we're in tier 4, those rules apply. For the sake, out of an abundance of caution, to the extent tier 3 applies, we extend the date to 15 unilaterally.
I'm happy to take that motion.
Yeah, it's a lawyer thing.
It's a self-respect, I understand the law. It doesn't hurt. It gets into the same place, it covers, potentially any weakness.
I move what I just said.
Yes, no, please.
I second.
Seconded by
Tom Hamilton?
Mr. Hamilton. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, please say no. Any abstentions?
Mr. Secretary,
Mr. Egan.
yeah, just a quick discussion.
Sorry.
And maybe for Garrett, let's pretend this is a month ago. Do we have the authority under tier 3 to unilaterally move the timeline of the 44 days?
The 44 days was never even met. We didn't get the contract within the 44 days, Mr. Regan.
Correct. Right. You got it.
Correct. The city is out of compliance with this
Right.
contract.
So I guess what I'm saying is that if there is a motion on the table, it should really be limited to a tier 4 situation, instead of tier 3 has one sailed into the sunset, and it took the contractual or the statutory 44-day timeline along with it. Whether that remains for challenge for the union or not is obviously decided by this board, but to push it all, I guess for the first part or second part of Mr. White's motion, I would say it may not be, it's probably not relevant at this time.
Mr. White, your hand is up. Oh, your hand is down. All right, well, we took the action we took. We have the laws that we have, prepared to rely on. We've taken action with regard to the budget. As I said, I'm not sure what more we can or should do today. We will schedule our next meeting. The 15th is a Wednesday, I believe, in June. We may shoot for that day. So we'll be looking forward to
So this is
budget
night.
to be submitted to
So
us
you
by
change
that
it
date.
to 15th.
Mr. Brockman.
Sorry, just at the risk of continuing, I apologize, but I noticed that the approval of the audit contract or the ability for the state to move into a procedure for the internal auditor is on that list. I don't know if we have to do anything, but if we do, I don't want to slow that process down.
We don't have to do anything in regards to non-labor contracts. It's for the board to review, so we choose.
Ms. Mayor Rossi.
Thank you. I only have one request that hopefully will be quick. We have on there some non-labor contracts for review by this board, and one is of significant importance, and that's the Bailey Middle School cafeteria. It's an ESSER-funded one, and the reason is because we're trying to get this finished by August the 15th. It's an increase in the cafeteria space to do over the summer, and if we don't get it started now, get approval from you folks to do this, it's going to delay this and push it out beyond the August 15th deadline.
Julia, are we required to approve these?
No approval is required. It's on the agenda because the MARB is required to have an opportunity to review and comment. So if there's comments.
Do people have comments on the Bailey Middle School cafeteria contract? Mr. White, your hand's up.
My hand was up on another question, which is, can we ask the mayor when we'll have the 5-year plan? That's all.
All right, let's go one step at a time. Do people have comments on the Bailey Middle School cafeteria contract? Okay. Mayor, Mr. White would like to know when we're going to see the 5-year plan.
We are working on it as soon as possible. The reason for the delay was because the budget had to go back 3 different times to the city council after adoption because it was not balanced and there were errors in it, the way that it got adopted in the first place. So we just got it finished last night, 100%. So it's in finance now for an overview. So that's why I need the first year before I can go to do the 5-year plan. So now we will be working on that.
Just a quick response.
Sure.
That's never been the case in the time you've been here, nor has it been with anybody else. You do the same thing, you do them both, and if you've got to revise year 1, you revise it. So we've got nothing to look at, and that's not the way it's been done before. That's it.
Okay, it's been a full day.
I think so.
I just want to confirm that we did complete the motion with Mr. White. I heard aye, and then we started with the discussion after. I just want to be sure that we completed that. And it's not a cliffhanger.
To the extent that this motion has any relevance under the law, we did complete it and we did approve it.
Very good.
It's my personal view that it does not, but that's just my view.
Okay.
But I was happy to, on Mr. White's behalf, to approve his motion.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
We didn't have to adjourn. You can't run in it.
Bring up, we will, I'll ask you. Yes.
I'm sorry, there's just that consideration as was discussed earlier, for in-person meetings moving forward.
Yes, I'd very much be interested in that. This technology, I think we're pushing the limits of its effectiveness. In fact, I think I just froze, as a matter of fact. I'm going to ask the staff to work on that and try to schedule our next meeting in person. Is it?
Full mark.
The full mark, yeah. Here.
That's subcommittees.
Well, at this moment, the subcommittee we have to move for the next time, so we need to get constant first on the next meeting. There's too many moving parts.
So the next meeting, I guess, will have to be special because it's not a regularly scheduled meeting.
We can reschedule, Secretary.
A regular meeting?
Yes, sir.
Well, whatever you call it, let's look at the 15th of June, which is a Wednesday. Let's try to do it in person. I'm going to say, we're all in Hartford. It is the capital. I know it's, I don't live close to Hartford either, but let's do it in Hartford. Where did you have them before? I've only known you on remote.
Board of Regents, we have the MARB meetings and the.
61 Woodland? Oh, it's a dog. We have the capital, the legislative office.
We did
We
once.
weren't given, that's,
We're going to look into it. It'll be.
you have the poll.
We'll look into it. We'll get you the
Subcommittees were also generally held in the municipality in which we were referenced, and that was done specifically, so not only for obviously the leadership of that municipality, but so the other local elected officials and residents would have the convenience of attendance. So that was just for the subcommittees. Regular MARB meetings were also up your way.
I don't know. Do you feel strongly about that? Do you want to leave it up to the subcommittees to make that decision as to where they meet?
That one I feel strongly about it for this next meeting, just because I have to make changes, so I would like to do that. Because the meeting is supposed to be next week, and we're going to have to change that meeting. Okay. So we,
Subcommittees work on that amongst themselves and meet where you feel best,
okay.
you're most effective. But I look forward to meeting you all in person in Hartford next month. Does anyone have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Mr. Egan, I believe, moved.
Yes.
Yes.
Second by Mr.
Waxenberg.
Mr. Waxenberg. It's not debatable. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any abstentions?
Do we
The ayes
have
have
any
it.
subcommittee
Adjourned.
meetings
Thank you
before
all very
the
much.
15th?
Thank you.
Torture.
I thought it was gonna be.
Okay, wait. Where's Killian? Wait. Can you just ask somebody in my office to come over and this is a word?
Killian on, turn on the mics.
Chancellor said, let's just wait.